There are three different types of AI that are normally discussed, besides the overarching AI umbrella: machine learning and deep learning. For AI, it's the idea of exceeding or matching the capabilities of a human being. The ability to discover, the ability to infer, and the ability to reason. So this is, again, a very overarching definition for generative AI. They can use certain solutions, such as natural language processing, vision, even for hearing, distinguishing what they say, and even being able to take that and create adjusted outputs from that information. They can obviously create things like text-to-speech, and there's even the capabilities of taking this AI and adding it into the field of robotics. So AI itself is this overarching area of artificial intelligence. Machine learning is based on predictions and decisions that are based on the available data, and these are called models. It has been said before that the more data that you have for these machine learning models, the better. More data equals better models. But as has been taught to me, it's not practice that makes perfect, it's perfect practice that makes perfect. So the idea is it learns versus being programmed, but it's based on the available data that you are training it with. Instead of changing code, in other words, if I'm a programmer, I'm basically adjusting the models based on the outputs that I want. So I'm not making specific commands, I'm giving it guidance, and through the training, these models will produce, hopefully, accurate outputs based on the data. There's supervised versus unsupervised learning. So obviously, supervised learning is with human oversight. And then, using things like labels and other techniques when it comes to the training of the models themselves. And then there's the unsupervised learning by the model itself, trying to allow the model to make its own decisions based on this data. And this is where the quality of the data is critical. A subfield of machine learning is deep learning. And this is patterned after the human brain, neural nodes, neural architectures. Interesting results can be gained from deep learning. It's a very non-traditional method of teaching a construct to take data to produce outputs. What's interesting about it is, similar to like a black box, sometimes even the developers of deep learning aren't aware as to how the outputs were derived by the model, because it is using this neural net type of architecture. They're very powerful. There's a lot of associations that are created by training these models, but at the same time, sometimes the outputs aren't as understood. So there's interesting security ramifications from this, as well as making sure that the content that comes out of these models is in fact accurate. Under this AI umbrella, we really have, according to the terminology today, what's known as weak AI, which is this understanding that the AI that we have today is limited memory AI systems. It doesn't sound very powerful, but in fact, as we know, many of the systems that are out there are extremely powerful. It is the only AI, though, that exists today. It still needs humans to train it, and they have certain limitations to their functions. In fact, we are rapidly into this point where there's all the data ever ingested by humanity being used by the AI constructs today. So we're actually finding a limitation now with what we have available in order to train these AI constructs. So where are we today? We're finding certain limitations, which is causing the people developing AI to think outside of the box and other ways in which to create these modular solutions. The way that I can put it is very similar to cloud applications, is that some of the earlier applications that were made were what they're called monolithic applications. So one-stop shop, all created in one place, one giant program, for lack of a better word, that does all the things that you need. If you're at a website, anything that you are accessing is all being handled by that one application. Today, it's almost actually the opposite when it comes to cloud and cloud applications. You have a situation where these different parts of that application are now cut and become modular into things called microservices. When you log into a cloud application, that will be one microservice. and then to go to the back end to get the information and to see whether or not you are appropriate to be able to be authenticated into the system. That would be another modular microservice. And we use things called APIs to communicate between these different microservices in a seamless way that makes it seem like it's one giant monolithic application. AI is doing similar things with AI agents. So the idea basically is to try to make it more high level, is that you take different, what they call tools or different components of AI. It could be a smaller LLM AI construct itself, or it could just simply be agents that have access to certain information, specifically your own specific information. So if I want, for example, my AI construct to be able to know, what's the best way for me to manage my time, it will need access to the data that's specific to me. This means that it will be able to look into my calendar, look into my email, look into whatever I need it to look into so it can make better decisions for me specifically, as opposed to like a general chatbot where it may be able to answer questions about life, the universe, and everything. Specific to myself, I will need these agents to be able to tie into my own data and produce information that is specific to myself. So this idea of agent-based or agentive AI is this shift away from the monolithic model to a more compound AI system. So today models are trained by the data they have available, and this is a limitation. It's difficult to adapt because you only have the data that you have available to you or to that construct, and it's very resource heavy in general. With the agent-based or agentive AI methodology or architecture, you're basically splitting up tasks, which is obviously always going to be more efficient, in some ways effective, because instead of having one giant AI system responsible for all the answers, you can have very specific AI models that answer specific tasks. And these constructs are able to gather very specific information that is going to be more detailed, that's going to be more in depth to what a user is going to be looking for. And then adding that with the access to your personal systems, to your personal data, can create quite a powerful outcome. That said, again, as a part of the risks to this, the more access that we allow these agent-based or AI agentive systems into, the more we need to understand what they're doing with that data, how they're handling that data, and making sure that they can't do anything more with that data than we expect them to and we want them to. So there's a lot of thinking that needs to go into this, and we're very early in the AI story today. So what does this mean ramification-wise going forward? Obviously, as a security professional, this raises concerns for myself personally, and as well as for I think the cybersecurity community overall, which is how much access do we want to grant? On the one hand, it's a very powerful thing to have these AI constructs being able to have access to my data because it can solve extremely complex problems. It can align any kind of scheduling system for me. It can take information to create emails that are exactly in my tone of voice and really be me in many ways. It can take over and become a very powerful assistant to my everyday life. That said, with that access, again, not trying to get into the science fiction aspect of this, but it could very easily create another me. It could also take that information and potentially exploit that information to other entities, to other groups, to other AI systems. It all depends on what these AI constructs are connected to, how they work, and how they're able to gather this data. So I think that as security professionals, we need to be very clear and aware of the capabilities of these systems, understanding exactly what kind of data these AI constructs or AI agents, these tools are able to access, making sure we understand what they can do with this data and understand the guardrails around these constructs in general. The problem with this, of course, is being as complicated as they are, and using deep learning as an example from before, we may not understand a lot of the relationships. We may not understand how the data flows as well as we should. And I think this is going to be on both the developers for these AI systems, as well as the cybersecurity professionals that are out there to understand more about the actual AI programming. It's also extremely important for the AI community, as well as the cybersecurity community, to share information, first of all, so that we both can understand how these AI systems work, and for the cybersecurity professionals to take that challenge and to understand AI development themselves so that they can better understand where security needs to be injected and or where there are potential exploits within this AI development process. Right now, basically we have developers who are just working nonstop at a fevered pace, trying to create the more advanced AI system out there. And I don't know, very similar to early development and applications for cloud, whether or not the security component has been thought of at the same level. In more cases than not, my own personal experience with developers are that they want to get these applications created. They want to get them to work the way they're supposed to work. They want them to have this very effective and powerful final product. Sometimes the security components, the security pieces are not looked into at the same level. So I think most likely with AI today, even though I'm sure they are thinking about security because it's discussed quite a bit, I think there's probably going to be opportunities here to look more deeply into the AI systems and to help them as developers to understand perhaps where different security opportunities may exist and to try to think about building in security as early as possible within these AI models so that it doesn't get lost with the different iterations and is always baked into the final constructs. As an example of how much more powerful these AI constructs can be with this modular design versus this monolithic design, I was doing some research and I found that as a comparison using ChatGPT, if you took ChatGPT, let's say 3, and used an agentive approach with that model, it was fairly equivalent to ChatGPT 4. Again, this is a very high-level example. I don't know the exact version of each, but the gist of it was that using this modular agentive approach where the different tasks, very similar again to microservices within cloud, having everything split where there was tasks handled individually with a more specific AI construct, that the overall output was a massive increase of performance. So you're able to take less powerful AI and by using this agentive approach, improve its overall efficiency and effectiveness with this architecture versus the monolithic approach where that one AI system must do all of the basically crunching of information and using its own, only the things that are within its one design to produce results. Many of the top AI think tanks seem to agree that this agentive approach will be the future when it comes to AI systems. Because of this, and this idea of these modular constructs, and then the idea of them tying into our own data, is why as cyber professionals, we need to come together as a community. We need to think about this with all of our experiences, with all of our knowledge, and try to make sure that we're working together to help these AI developers understand security from our perspective. I've seen with a lot of the different videos that are out there today on YouTube and other resources that are out there that people are looking to for guidance, is that we're still thinking in a legacy fashion when it comes to cybersecurity with AI technology. We're talking about governance, we're talking about things like access control, obviously things like logging, monitoring, and alerting, SIEMs. We're talking about things like overall change controls to make sure that we know what we're doing, and release code management for SDLC. That's all very important things. 100% we need to look at that. We do need oversight, we do need governance. But I do think what's missing is the actual understanding of how AI is developed itself, understanding how the data is used, how it pulls the data, how it creates understanding from this data and associations from this data, how we ensure that the data sources that it's pulling from are good, clean sources of data, how we make sure that if it is accessing critical, personally identifiable information, how it's handling that information, how we can somehow create guardrails around the usage of this data, and also how we can validate the information that's coming out as the outputs from this AI system. Unfortunately, again, there are situations where poisoning of data and sources that were not intended to be used, somehow the AI system is able to access them and produces these outputs that are not accurate or not correct. There's talks about hallucinations. There's other areas of AI that we really got to understand so that we know we can depend upon the information that comes from these systems. Because if not, you can end up having a very bad outcome. A little bit different, but as an example, there was news recently about a AI system. I don't think we have the full story yet in this, so I'm going to summarize at a high level, but I don't believe that this AI system was trained specifically for this situation, but a user started to communicate with this AI system as a therapist. And again, I do not believe this system was probably trained for this, but being an AI system, it tried to adapt and learn from these communications it was having. And this person was asking very deep questions about life and whether or not this person should continue living. And my understanding is that this AI system produced responses that made that person feel that perhaps they should not continue living. And that person took their life. And this is a very extreme situation, but this is something that we have to think about. When we create something, even if the AI developers had no reason or no inclination to develop this system for that use, people can be using these systems in ways that we do not intend, that those developers of these AI systems do not intend. Understanding how we can limit certain responses or how we can limit certain discussions or certain requests for data is another aspect of security in some ways, because of course, people process technology, people being the most important. Safety is critical. If we're going to have AI systems that may provide answers to us around health, we have to make sure that that data is accurate. If we're going to be using AI systems for defense, we have to make sure that that data is as accurate as possible. If the AI systems are going to help us with water treatment or with other areas that human beings depend on for their lives, it could even be power grid, it could be the traffic system for lights within a city. All of these things are critical infrastructure, critical resources that human beings depend upon. So we need to make sure that these systems are providing outputs that are accurate, because lives could literally depend upon that.